to come and hear Mr. Steketee. Our guest speaker is John Steketee, and he's here visiting his son, daughter-in-law, and his grandchildren from the East Coast. He's going to be sharing with you his personal experiences from the 1940 to 1944, and the Nazis, how they came and how they took over his city and what happened. And again, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Thank you. Of course, they made a tape of the first one, so I have to tell you different stories for the second tape, right? You all have learned, of course, that the Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939, when the German army rolled into Poland, when the Stuka bombers destroyed Warsaw. This was in agreement with Joseph Stalin. Hitler had made a plan with Joseph Stalin, and the Russian army rolled in from the east while the German army went in from the west. They met about halfway in Poland, and they split up the country between them. So that was on the 1st of September. And the 2nd of September, England and France declared war on Germany because they refused to pull their troops back. What happened in the West was not very much, because all the fighting was going in Central Europe. And it didn't come into the West until April 1945. So the time of the Second World War, between September 1939 and April 1940, sorry, I said 45, it's 1940, was called the Phony War. Now, believe it or not, but at one time in history I was about as old as you are. Children never believe that old people were once young. But I got proof, because I was in high school, and this is my high school senior class picture. And I'm standing next to my teacher, who's holding a cigar, and I'm not smoking that cigar. That's his cigar, but it looks like it is very close to my face. I was 15 years old when I became a senior, because in Holland you go to grade school for 6 years, and then if you want to, you can go to a high school for 3 years. You have a choice for another high school for 4 years, or another for 5 years, depending on what your career path you take. I went to a 3-year high school where they teach you bookkeeping and languages and so on, so I could use that in business. The problem was the first year I got sick for 3 months, so I had to do the first year over again. So I was already 15 by the time I became a senior. Now, we had a very strange high school. This was, I think, the only one in the city that worked that way. We had a full day on Monday and Wednesday and Friday, and a half a day on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So when you had a full day work, full day school, you had only homework for a half a day. But if you had a half a day of school, you had homework for the full day. So that made things a little bit easier, and I always liked that. I thought that was a very great idea. If your kids like to go to school on Saturday morning, right? Well, anyway, I'll pass that picture around one of these minutes. That school also had an alumni association, and many people in that organization liked acting. So they, once every 2 or 3 years, they studied a play and put it up in a real theater, in a big theater in town. And they had planned one for May 9, 1940. And the senior class was invited. So, with all my other seniors, I went to that performance on May 9, 1940. And we were finished by about 11 o'clock, and we went home, not knowing that the German army and the German Air Force was already on its way to overrun Holland on the 10th of May 1940. That's when the war started in Holland. It had already started in Denmark on the 9th of April, I think. Denmark was taken, and the next week Norway was taken. We always, in Holland, we thought that we could stay neutral, that the German armies wouldn't come, because during the First World War, they attacked France through Belgium. And you know the song on Flanders fields, the poppies grow, and so on. So that was in Belgium. And they thought in Holland that maybe the Germans would do that again. But there was a German general in the First World War, von Schlieffen, and he had a plan to come through Holland and to go south. So the German High Command in the Second World War followed the old First World War plan von Schlieffen, and they attacked Holland. Now Holland was a country at that time of about, maybe about 13 million people, and Germany had 80 million people, so it was no contest. But Holland did not want to roll over and play dead, so they fought the German army for 5 days. And then we were told that if they didn't surrender, they would start bombing the cities. So Rotterdam, which the Marines had held, the Marines kept the Germans from crossing the river, was surrendered, which meant, of course, that all the anti-aircraft guns fell silent and they would not fire on any planes anymore. But Hitler had been so angry with Holland that they resisted that he had sent his planes anyway. And shortly after the surrender, the German planes came in and not a shot was fired at them. So they flew in at about 1,000 feet and they bombed Rotterdam. But they did it very methodically, and they threw all their bombs, or most of their bombs, in the main boulevard and in the big streets, so that they would break up the gas and the water mains, and they sprayed magnesium on that. So the city went on fire and burned for about 3 weeks. And a third of the city burned, which meant, of course, that not as many people died as if they had come in blanket bombed the city, but still 1,200 people died in that bombardment. But a third of the city burned. I can show you some of that. I have some pictures here. For instance, of course not many, just a few. Here. This is what one of the major restaurants looked like before and after, so you can pass this around. And here is, these three go together. This is the winter picture of one of the big churches, and this is how it looked after the bombardment, and these are the surroundings. See how black everything is? There was also one of the main ocean liners was lying in the harbor in Rotterdam, and it was it had three funnels. Now the third funnel was a fake one. They used the third funnel for ventilation, so there was no smoke coming out of that. And that ship was supposed to sail on the 10th of May, so it was full of bunker fuel, full of oil. And German paratroopers had landed there, and they had set up a machine gun in the third funnel, and they were shooting at the Dutch army across the river. They had some mortars, and they shot the mortars right down the funnel, and it went in the bowels of the ship all the way in the bottom, where it ignited the oil, and that ship burned, and it sank.
Did they notice that in the salt? Gas and oil?
Oh yeah,
Fuel stuff?
they knew that. The ship was supposed to leave, so they were aware of the fact that it was full. But they had no choice. They were being shot at, so they shot them. So on the 14th of May, the Germans destroyed the city where I live. And we still had to write our high school exams, because that was in June. But the government said, shall we give them their diploma? So no, we better not do that, because later in life, when you have to show your diploma and you say, I have a high school diploma from 1940, they said, oh, that was the year that they gave them away. So they decided that no matter, in spite of the bombardment and the air raids that were going on from that time on, we had to write our 2 days of written exam and 1 day of oral exam. And look, I made it. you complain about all the work you have to do in school, right? And I heard from the other class, you have 8 subjects? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Ooh.
4 languages every day. Your own language, which was Dutch, plus French, English, and German. History, geography, physics, algebra, bookkeeping, all these nice subjects, you know, especially when you're 15 years old, you love them. Okay. Now, so from May 1940, Holland was under German command. Now they moved very slowly because people who have never been involved in a totalitarian regime, who have always been in a democracy, have no idea actually how to deal with a situation that changes like that. Now, for instance, in 1941, everybody had to have an ID. You have to carry that with you all the time. Like this one. With the German stamps on it. This is mine. This is the good-looking guy, you know. And this is the girl's name, and this girl became my wife eventually. So you want to see? So the fingerprints are on there. And be very careful with them because they're the only ones I have and they don't make them anymore. Now in September 1940, I was looking for a job because I was told by the labor office that if you didn't have a job, you had to go to Germany and work in the munitions factories. And I couldn't find a job. But then the gentleman I knew, who was an acquaintance of my father, and who, what I found out later, happens to be a second cousin of my wife, he said, you can come and work for me, but I haven't got any money. So I said, well, when I come, as long as I have a job, I'll come and work for you. So I worked 5.5 days a week for nothing. But then the labor office said, that's no job. You've got to have money. You've got to have a salary. And so I told him that. I said, this doesn't count. He said, yeah, but I have no money. What I will do, out of my own pocket, I'll give you a salary. I'll pay you $2.50 a week for 5.5 days' work. So there was a salary. And that counted, even though it was only a little bit. It counted. So, but I kept on looking for work. And in December, I got a job in the Social Security office, which was in the Dutch civil government, of course. And I got the largest percentage pay in my life. I started to earn $5.88 for 5.5 days' work. And that was more than 100% than I earned with my $2.50, you know. I've never had 100% raise in my life since, I can tell you that. And I worked for these people until May 1942, when I became 18. And if I wanted to have a permanent appointment with the Social Security office, I would have to serve 2 years in a uniformed service of the German army in construction and defense work, and that I was not going to do. So I quit. And now I want to tell you something that I haven't told the others, because I think it might be important. Sometimes you learn things in school, and you wonder why you ever have to learn things. The subject is not interesting, you don't like it. But I worked in that Social Security office, and then many years later, in 1946, way after the war, I started to work for the steamship company. And many of their sailors had been outside, what we call outside, sailing for the Allies. And in 1942, the Dutch government had taken over their payroll, but up till November 1942, all these people were still in the payroll, on the payroll of the steamship company. And the steamship company was responsible for the Social Security premium of these seamen. So they came to me and they said, "You know something about Social Security?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, here are all the books of all the sailors that were ever out from 1940 to 1942. Why don't you figure out how much money we owe the government?" So I sat down and worked through all these books, and from what I had learned in that Social Security office, I developed a system which I thought was very easy. So I didn't have to figure it out for each person individually. I designed a system which was applicable to every sailor, under every circumstance, no matter what ship he sailed on. And then the people of the Social Security office found out that I had done that, so they sent 2 inspectors over. I was a big guy, I was 21 years old. And I explained to them what I had done. And they were so impressed that they applied that to every other steamship company in the Netherlands. So I want to tell you that if you learn something when you're young, don't say it doesn't mean anything or it isn't of any value. I'm living proof. I didn't like that word so very much in the Social Security office, but I learned things which I could apply and which was good enough to be accepted nationally. So, anyway, I quit that job in 1942 and went to work in a shipyard. Now you may say that the shipyard was a defense industry for the Germans, and that's true. But every other thing that you did was for the Germans, because they controlled the industry, they controlled everything. And I was asked to come and work, and I would be trained as an assistant purchasing agent. First I went through what they call the machine hall. I learned all materials. I learned to identify different kinds of steel, different kinds of bronze, different kinds of many metals. They made guidance systems for torpedoes and all that stuff. They also had a lot of sabotage. And that wasn't so funny because you could understand that. I know the Dutch had a cruiser that was being built in that shipyard, and of course the Germans had taken it over. Now the cruiser had gun turrets, and they turned on big cog wheels. Now these cog wheels were cast iron, which they poured, and then somebody one day took a hammer and broke one of the cogs out of the wheel. That was not very good. The Germans were very, very angry when that happened because they had to break the thing up and start all over again. That's why sometimes people went into concentration camps, yes.
What was the coffee?
Big gear. The gear. The gear with teeth.
Oh, for like boats and stuff?
Yeah. Well, you have them also in cars. You have them in your watch. There are gear wheels in your watch, you know. I hope so. Do they still have gears in watches nowadays? I don't know. But it's a gear with teeth. And sometimes some of the people in the shipyard went to concentration camp. But then the British particularly became interested in that shipyard because it was close to the coast and they did a lot of work there. So they started bombing us. They started bombing us in 1942 and they picked up in 1943, particularly in March 1943. I've got these little booklets here. I have about 10 of these and they're all for a year and I made notes in them. And in March 1943, they started bombing us in the beginning of May and they kept it up through most of May. one day what I told. You get so used to bombardments, you know. We had one every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday morning they came again. So we said to each other, what? We know from experience they don't come back in the afternoon, so why don't we stay and clean up the office a little bit? But they did come back in the afternoon. We got short. Then the American Air Force made a high-level bombing run on the harbor of Rotterdam on March 31st, 1943. And what they didn't know was that the wind at the lower level was against them. So they were coming from this direction and they intended to throw their bombs in this area of the harbor. But they moved and they all fell in the populated areas. They burned down, destroyed 10,000 homes, they killed 700 people. And I was at the shipyard and I wanted to get home. But I had to get through the area that was bombed. And these were streets that had 4- and 5-story row houses. And they were all burning right through the top. The streetcars were burning in the middle of the street. There were dead people all over the place. And we had to ride by bicycle over there to get home. And then unbeknownst to me, my fiancée and we worked all through the night trying to get people out of their homes and help them get their furniture out before their houses burned down. And it burned so hard that the fire departments were almost powerless. The Germans brought in fire departments from the army and from Germany because for them this was a tremendous opportunity to set us up against the Americans, of course. Yes, we.
Women who you got injured in the fire?
Yeah. A friend of my father's lost his wife and 3 of his 4 children that they were in the doctor's office. The doctor's office took a direct hit and everybody, all the patients and the doctors were all dead. But what they had to do, the fire was burning so fiercely that the Germans came and they took sticks of dynamite. And the house that was not on fire yet, they would throw dynamite in. And when the fire came, it would blow a gap so that it would stop the fire. So it works. It's very drastic, but it works. At that time, they used this as a tremendous opportunity to bear down on the Americans, of course. You see what your friends are doing to you? Because we were, of course, the Allies were our friends. But we were occupied by the Germans. So that was a bad one. March 31st, 1943. There's another March that I don't think about it. That always, that was bad.
Did you ever just think that this is gotta be a dream that you just cannot believe that this is happening?
I couldn't hear you.
Okay. Did you ever just think that this was a dream you did?
No. No, it was too real. And when the bomb explodes, you know for sure that it is for real, you know. How far did we get? 1943. 1944, things got a little hairier, but certain funny things happened too. During the summer of 1944, the Germans had gathered up the information of all the men in Holland and stored that information in a building in The Hague so that they could pull it out. Anybody that they wanted to arrest, they knew where they lived, when they were born, how old they were, and so on. So they stored that information in a building in The Hague. And on a Sunday afternoon, I'm standing with my girl in her home, which was on the 3rd floor, and she lived on a very big, wide boulevard with trees in the middle. And all of a sudden, the air raid sirens go, and the machine guns started fire, and 2, what we call mosquito bombers, they were fired, small bombers, flew down the street, so low that we were looking down in the cockpit as these guys were flying by. And these were Dutch pilots who had lived in The Hague, and they came and they flew through the streets with their planes to pick out that building and destroy all those records. And I presume they did it for us. They had huge orange lions sewn to their uniform. You know that the orange lion is the sign of the House of Orange, which was the Rotterdam House of Orange. So here these farmers are flying below your window. You guys are waving to us as they come by. In the middle of a war, this was tremendous, you know. It was so exciting. And it was very successful because they knew exactly where they were going. But then, as you know, that in 1944, the Allied armies had landed in France, and they came up through Belgium. They had the port of Antwerp already. And then Montgomery, the British general, decided that he would use his armies trying to get all the bridges over the big rivers of the eastern part of Holland in one big operation. And he got them all except one. And that's the bridge in Arnhem. And Ryan wrote a book about that, which I hope you have in your library. It's called A Bridge Too Far.
We will, if we don't.
Yeah.
Hopefully so.
Okay, and read that. It cost 10,000 lives, and they did not take the bridge. Now you ask, sometimes if you know people, yes. Mr. Steketee's brother, who lives in Fort Collins here, he has a friend who lived on the corner house by the bridge where all that fighting was going on. So it's very close. And in the town of Veld, which is about, maybe 3 or 4 miles away from Arnhem, my girl and I were on vacation just before that. Now, maybe it was very modern of my parents that they let me and my girl go on vacation together, but we were sleeping in 2 different homes. Don't worry about it, okay? I was staying with one family, and she was staying with another family, and we only saw each other during the day. We were modern, but not that modern. So, and we went to museums, and we took a lot of walks. And one day we were walking along a main road, and there was a forest on the side, in woods, and there was no fence. So we thought, we'd walk through the fence, walk through the woods and see what we can find. And we walked, and we walked, and we walked, and we didn't see anybody, and it was so quiet. Here we come out of the woods on the other side, and there is a big billboard. But we came on the blind side of the billboard. So we walk under it and turn around, and then we found out why it was so quiet. We had walked through a minefield. So I always said to her, it's good we didn't sit down because we might have gone off with a bang. But it is also possible that it was only a tank minefield or something like that, which you need a much heavier vehicle to set off the mine. But we didn't know that. We had also seen a detachment of German tanks that were had been pulled back from the front, and these guys were taking a rest. And the Dutch underground informed the British Army that those tanks were there. And they never paid much attention to that, and that's why they lost the bridge. Because those tanks became a major part in the battle that defeated the Allies from taking that bridge. So it was only a boy, see, who had told him. The boy had seen these tanks in the woods, and he had told his father, and his father was in the underground, and they radioed London that the boy had seen tanks in the forest. And they paid no attention, and it cost them 10,000 lives. Now, when that happened in September 1944, the Dutch government in exile in London gave orders to the railroad in Holland to go on strike, so that the Germans couldn't use the railroads to transport troops and materiel. All the railroads went on strike. The result was that civilians couldn't travel either. And that was tough for me because my girl lived in The Hague that was 18 miles away. And I couldn't go and see her. And that's terrible when you can't see your girl, right? So I haven't seen her for, what was it, 2 months? September, October, November, yeah. So on the 9th of November, I thought I had a gift for her that I had bought on the black market. I had a purse for her. Somebody had made from leather, and I bought that for her. So I thought I'd go and visit her. So I had to walk 18 miles. Well, maybe the first 10 and the other 8 or 6 or something. I could get a streetcar which brought me in the city, and then I walked to her house. And I saw her for 20 minutes, gave her the present, and then I walked back again. So I walked 36 miles to see my girl for 20 minutes. Anybody want to do that? But when I came back to Rotterdam, I noticed that there was a sharp increase in army activity. There were many more soldiers. And I found out the next day why. This is only a photocopy. I'll show you the real thing later. This is an order from the German army that all men between the ages of 17 and 40 have to report and stand in front of their house to be collected and sent to Germany for labor in the defense industry. I made a translation of that because it is in Dutch, of course. Let me see where it is. It says, order. By order of the German army, all men between the ages of 17 and 40 must report for labor duty. To this end, upon receipt of this order, all men of the ages mentioned must stand in the street with the prescribed equipment. All other inhabitants, including women and children, must remain indoors until the action is finished. Men of the designated ages who will be found indoors upon search of their homes will be punished and their personal property confiscated. Certificates of exemption of civil or military authorities must be presented for checking. Also, those who have such certificates must stand in the street. You have to bring warm clothes, warm shoes, blankets, protection against rain, plate, knife, fork, spoon, mug, and sandwiches for one day. Imagine that this is after 4 years of war. You'd be happy to have one pair of shoes. Daily remuneration consists of good food, smokes, and 5 guilders. They can lie so easily. Remaining family members will be cared for. All inhabitants are forbidden to leave their place of residence. And what is type of all and heavy type says, those who try to escape or offer resistance will be fired upon. Now what do? I wasn't going to go. I wasn't going to go stand in front of my house until these guys came and collect me. I had stayed out of their hands for 4 years already. And we had 2 other guys that my father and mother had put up already for more than a half a year who were hiding from the Germans. So we decided we were not going to go. So we lived in a split-level home. My bedroom and my sisters were downstairs. So we put the blackout on the windows and we unscrewed all the light bulbs because for that one day the Germans had given us electricity, which we hadn't had since September. So it was pitch dark. And when the Germans came to the front door, these fellas jumped the fence, a couple of fences, and went to a home where the Germans had been already. And these were friends of ours. And this lady had an old mother, was about 95 years old, lying in her bed. And one of the guys scooted in her bedroom and slid under her bed. So she calls her daughter. She says, "Lena, there is a man under my bed." No, mother, that's impossible. There is no man under your bed. Yeah, there is a man under my bed. No, there is no man under your bed. But there was a man under her bed. So I was in the basement, and I had a little suitcase packed that in case they would arrest me, at least I would have my stuff ready. And these guys come with their hobnail boots, trudging through the house. I've said sometimes I can still hear those boots, you know. And they opened the door to the stairs, and they didn't come down the stairs. Here 2 soldiers, armed with machine pistols, with hand grenades in their boots. The German hand grenades are made of sticks with a hand grenade on the top. And it has a little string on it that they put on their finger, and then they throw the hand grenade with the stick, and that starts it. So here they're standing at the top of the stairs, And I'm here, a 20-year-old boy, man. But they didn't come down the stairs. They were not going to walk into that white hole. So they talked to my mother and my father, and they said, we got enough of these guys already, and they walked out. So I got away with it. And it's not because of me, but I have said to others too, so many times I've been in danger of my life or in danger of being arrested, and the Lord always kept me out of their hands, and I didn't die, and I didn't go into a concentration camp. So I always felt that I was very privileged, and that I had to use my life to serve other people too, which I couldn't always do when I worked. So when I retired 13 years ago, I decided to act on that feeling, and I started to visit people in hospitals and who were sick and old, and tried to give them some comfort and tried to bring them something of the gospel to show that how God works in their life. Well, anyway, I was in hiding in my father and mother's house, and we found other places for these boys to go to. And we hadn't found any place for me. And I think it was I can look it up in here. I think it was the 12th of December. I had been in the house for a couple of weeks already, and I got a bit stir crazy. Cabin fever, do you guys say? Right in the mountains. Cabin fever. So I said, I'm going to visit my aunt. Curfew was from 6 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. We were not allowed out of the house. But in Holland, where it is at a much higher latitude than we are here, 6 o'clock at night it's dark, and 6 o'clock in the morning it's dark. So I said to my mother, I'm going to visit your sister. That was about a 2-hour walk from our house. At least I'm out of the house for a moment. I'm crazy. That's what I did. That day they raided the house. The only day that I was not home, the Germans came and raided the house. In the apartment above us, there were 5 people, 2 girls and 3 boys. They were brothers and sisters and had lost their father and mother already before the war and decided to live together as a family. And they were a unit in the underground. They had radio contact with London. And their radios were buried in our closets. They had the apartment above us, so we had opened the floor and reinforced the top of our closets and sunk the radios in between. But for a couple of weeks already, the Germans had been riding around with direction-finding equipment trying to find radios. And evidently they did. And they came and raided the house. And like I said, it was the only day I wasn't home. And these boys were picked up and sent to a concentration camp. Now that night, I came back. Must have been around 5 o'clock, because at 6 o'clock I had to be in. And half a mile away from my home, I passed a guy and I thought he had a bicycle pump in his hand. But it was not a bicycle pump, it was a Sten gun. That was the underground. They were trying to rescue the fellows who had been arrested that day. And a little further on, I met a German officer, and behind him, a civilian walks. So I passed these 2 people as that firefight starts. I mean, these guys are starting to try to rescue these friends of theirs. That German officer gets so flustered by that firefight that he pulls his pistol and he shoots the guy who was walking behind him. It had nothing to do with it. And I was just a walk away from him. So it was, we say I'm lucky. Luck has very little to do with it. I believe that the Lord, like I said, my life was saved many, many times. But I had to leave the house because I was betrayed. I had a neighbor who was a Nazi, and he was going to tell the Germans that I hadn't gone in that transport. Oh, I forgot to tell you that. Those 2 days that they picked up men, you know how many men they picked up? 55,000. And most of them walked to Germany or were shipped in barges. 55,000. 5,000 men they picked up in 2 days. And 5,000 of them never came back. They died in the munitions industries in Germany. I know many people who went there.
So they picked up the people who were in the military or?
No, civilians.
Yeah.
Civilians. These were people who had gone out and stood in the front of their house by this order. You know.
Did they put in work in military or different camps, so like labor camps or?
Yeah, in labor camps. And some of them were, my brother-in-law, he was quartered in a civilian house, and he was very lucky because the civilian happened to be a baker, so he got food. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So I had to leave the house, and I went to a nursing home. There were old people in there, and there were already 2 guys in hiding there, and I knew these people, and they were willing to put me up. And believe it or not, we had electricity in that house. That was something very remarkable because the whole city was without electricity. But on the right-hand side of that house was a German headquarters, and on the left-hand side of that house was a Nazi headquarters. And the cables ran through our basement, so we had electricity. What do you know? We also had hiding places in there. Often people have asked me, did you know anything about hiding places like in Amsterdam, like Anne Frank? I never heard of Anne Frank until I read her book in the United States. But we had hiding places. On the 2nd floor of that building, there was an older, what they call a patrician building. They had a door in the middle of the wall, and when you went through that door, you were in a bathroom, in a toilet. Then there was a wall, and there was a second door. And you went through that second door, and there was a big bathroom. I have an idea that it was an old house, and that they had a room, and that they built a bathroom out of that room, because it had a bath, it had a 2-person fold-away bed, and it had a couch. So these 3 guys and I, we slept in that bathroom. But they had cut holes in the ceiling with hinges. So when you folded the bed away, and you took the rug away, and you took the linoleum away, you found that trap door. You could open the trap door, and the beams were about 16 inches high in these old houses. And we had a radio in there, and we listened to the British broadcast, and then typed up news releases, which were stenciled, and they were handed out in the neighborhood. You get shot for that. So one morning, one afternoon, I don't remember, we all of a sudden found a whole bunch of Germans standing in front of the house, and we said, hey, what's going on? So quickly the bed went up, and the rug went away, and the linoleum went away, and the trapdoor went open, and the 3 of us lay down in between the floors with a typewriter. I think I had a typewriter on my stomach, and the other had the radio. Closed the trapdoor, put the linoleum down, put the rug down, put the bed down, and stuck a nurse in the bed. Supposedly she was sick. If the Germans came in, they wouldn't bother. And we had holes where the ceiling meets the floor, where the ceiling meets the wall, I'm sorry. So while we were lying in between the floors, we could peek through these holes and see what was going on in the street. And then pretty soon we find out that these Germans were not interested in us at all. They were doing something entirely different. So we got out of there. It's the only time in my life I've lain between floors, and it's dirty. And one night, front doorbell rings, and in walks, I think a niece or a cousin. I think she was a niece of the man who owned the nursing home. And she walks in with a German officer. I think he was an Oberreiter, which is a Oberreiter must be a sergeant, something like that. And she was bad. She was a bad girl. She used to travel on the German trains with German soldiers. She found this guy and she brought him in. Well, what are you going to do? We can't say go away. And he had seen us already. So we went in the living room and we just talked to him. All of us could speak German, of course, by that time. And he told us the most amazing story. He said he was born in Kyrgyzstan, in Central Asia. And when he was 10 years old, He walked to Russia, and he grew up in Russia, and he became a member of the Russian army, where he graduated to the rank of officer. And then the Russians told him to defect to the Germans and become a spy for the Germans. He said, yeah, sure. They said, and you're going to tell me that, right? I'm the enemy, and you're going to tell me that you're the spy? Oh, come on. I didn't believe that at all. And it was true that I didn't have to believe him, because after the war, other people, I have never seen it, found out that he had written a report of the meeting of that evening for the German Sicherheitsdienst, for the German political police. I have a very poor memory for names. That's why I don't remember all your names. But this guy's name I will never forget. He had hands that were about this wide, very short, he had very short fingers. And his name was Paul Sarikov. Now why do I remember that? I don't know. It must have been a very intense meeting we had with him. I asked him to show me his gun, which was a Luger. And I figured if he would disarm that gun before he showed it to me, and he was afraid of me that I would get hold of that thing, you know. And sure enough, he disarmed that gun before he showed it to me. So I figured, boy, you're a liar. And, I was right. He was a liar. But a very dumb liar. Stories that you don't believe. And when I came back from hiding, I had to, because there were so many dead people around, that the father, we called him the father of the house, insisted that we get typhoid fever shots. Because it was in the middle of the winter, people were dying left and right from starvation, because the Germans had confiscated all the food, since the Canadian armies now already had gone through the eastern part of Holland, and everything was closed off. So those three provinces in the west, the Allies had decided that it would take too many lives, both military and civilian, to liberate us, because of the density of the population, and these parts of the country are bisected by very large rivers, so it would be very difficult. So they decided to let us sit until the end of the war. So we had no food. I ate tulip bulbs, sugar beets, and nettles, and all kinds of junk. You know Brussels sprouts? They grow on the stalk. They're about this long. We cut open the stalk. We didn't have the sprouts, but we cut open the stalk and scraped the marrow out. And that's what we ate. So I got my shot for typhoid fever, and I got very sick. I had to go home. My father and mother came, and I was walking. They were holding me up. I was walking in between them. I was 20 years old, and I couldn't walk on my own. And then my friend's wife saw me, and she said, "You come tomorrow, I'll give you something." That was very fortunate for her, because he was away. I don't know where he was. I think he was in hiding also. Because we had a bombardment that day. They tried to destroy the headquarters of the political police, the Green Polizei. And that was pretty close to where we lived. So I helped her with her three little children get through the bombardment. So that's how we helped each other. But then it became pretty close to the end of the war, and the Germans had given permission to the Allies to come in with bombers and to drop foodstuffs for the cities, because so many people were dying. In the city of Rotterdam, where I live, more people died in the first 2 weeks of 1945 than in the year 1939. So they dropped all kinds of foodstuffs in the designated area in town. But it takes time. You know, if you have a city of 500,000 or 600,000 people and you have plenty of food, it has to be organized, it has to be divided, it has to be distributed so that it is all even. Some people didn't understand that. So they thought that they would get food right away because they saw food coming down from heaven out of big bombs. They were Lancaster bombs. So they ate what they had. They died. It took them 10 days to get food. More people died in those 10 days than in the rest of that time. Very remarkably, a couple of years ago, I was in a store in Pleasantville, New Jersey, and the guy says, "You're from home." You heard that in my accent, you know. And we started talking about the war. He was my age, or maybe he was a year older. And he said he was in command of a group of bombers that delivered foodstuffs to Amsterdam. And the Germans had given permission to have that done. And these bombers were not armed. They had no guns. They had no bombs. All they carried was food. And on the way back, the Germans shot down 9 of them. These were unarmed bombers. And, excuse me. He almost cried because he said, "I lost 9 crews of 12 men each." That's my story. Now I'll show you something else. My sister came from Holland in 1997, and they brought me this calendar from 1998. Because in all these 50 years now since the war, they have been rebuilding the city. So she said, I'll stand up because I can't get forever going. This is the rebuilt city of what it looks like now. This bridge, you see this bridge? This is a pylon. And all the cables, these two hold the pylon in place, and the whole bridge hangs from these cables, and they call it the Swan. Here it is again, see? This is all new. That was all burned. And it's very beautiful, but I don't want to go. I go there on a visit. I worked in New York City for 27 years. I've seen all the big cities I want to see. I'd like to live in a small place, really. Thank you, Linda.
Welcome. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask him?
Yeah.
Do you think you will ever forgive the people who did this to you?
Well, I think that for the people who lived in Holland, it is easier than for me, because they got to know the Germans in a democratic setting after the war. My memories stopped at a bad time. If I had known these people as persons, it might be a lot easier. So, yeah, I have bad feelings about the Germans. I have bad feelings about what the television shows tell about them, because whenever they talk about Germany during the war, they say it was the Nazis. It wasn't only the Nazis, it was the whole nation who did it. You know, so, but I do realize that they are the only people who acknowledge what they have done wrong. They teach their children what was wrong, and they make good citizens out of them. That is much different in Japan. Japan completely denies what they have done. The school children in Japan, when they teach them about the Second World War, they start at Hiroshima. And they do not say anything about what they did in China and in the Dutch East Indies and in the Philippines. Yes, sir.
Did you know about the concentration camps during the war, or just
Well, I knew about concentration camps in Holland, which were only only camps where people were brought for transportation. But these extermination camps, we heard rumors about it, but they kept that very quiet. And if you read about the British and the Americans and the Russians when they came in these camps, they were completely stunned at what they found because they didn't realize what was going on. They kept that very, very secret. That's why these camps were so far away from populated areas. For instance, they kept it secret from their own population. What the Americans did, the Americans did it too, and the Russians did it too. They forced the population who lived near these camps to come and see what was going on, because they didn't believe that their own people could do that, and had done it. And in many concentration camps, they marched the population of the surrounding cities through the concentration camps to show them that they weren't lying.
Did you ever have any feelings besides negative towards the soldiers? Did you ever have any feelings besides negative towards the soldiers?
Towards who?
The people who did that.
Yeah. Oh, I can tell you that, sure. We had Germans that we had. There is a German commander of a town where my sister-in-law lives. He was decorated by the Dutch government for what he did during the war, because he would warn the population when the SS or the Secret Service would come to arrest them. And this was a German officer who did that. We had a German officer, he was a Navy officer, and I never forget, this guy would come in the morning, he had his hat on, and he said, "I let her." Say a word. Nobody would say a word. He'd take his hat off, put it under his arm, and said, "Guten Morgen, meine Herren." And he said, "Guten Morgen, Herr." We had so much fun. There was one guy, he was from Alsace-Lorraine. Now, Alsace-Lorraine are two French provinces that were taken away from the French by the Germans. So he spoke French fluently. But when you spoke German with him, he would never say a bad word. But my boss, who spoke French fluently, he would speak French with him, and he'd swear at the word. So funny. He said, "They put me in this position. There's nothing I can do. I got 30 guys around me who are Nazis. What can I do?"
Have you ever had a chance to talk to Hitler? What would you say to him?
I don't think I would. No. I think that the devil has been talking to him in the last 50 years.
Remember where you were when they announced the war was over?
Yeah, but there were two dates for me. The German army surrendered to the Dutch on the 5th of May. So we heard that, and we went outside, and the underground came, and they had their stem guns, and they were going to take over the bridges from the German soldiers. And then I see these Germans, they turned their guns on them, and they arrested these guys. We were supposed to be free. The SS kept on executing people in Rotterdam until the evening of May 7th. It was just a couple of hours before the war was over in May 8th. If you hung your flag out because you wanted to celebrate, and the SS saw it, they took a bazooka and they blew up your house with a bazooka, which they called Panzerfaust. Yeah. So for me, there are 2 days. Now, May 8th, of course, is the end of the Second World War in Europe, not yet in Asia. And that happened to be my 21st birthday. So for me, the war started 2 days after I became 16, and it ended on my 21st birthday. So for all practical purposes, I lost all my teen years. And we didn't have good teen years.
What was running through your head when the Germans first started to take over?
Fun?
What was running through your head when the Germans first started to take over?
Well, thing we saw were the airplanes coming in, of course. And there were different kinds of airplanes. They had Junkers 88, which had troops in them and tried to land troops. Then on Easter Sunday, but they came in on Good Friday. I'm quite sure that it was Good Friday. I was 16 years old. I got strafed by a fighter plane with machine guns. I didn't like that very much. And then on the 14th, we saw these bombers, and they came really low down on the clouds, and it's like a chicken dropping eggs. These bombs didn't even have time to tip, you know, so that's how low they were. They were just dropping bombs all over the place. Feelings are very subjective, you know. They grow. And the more of your people got hurt, but I didn't tell you when I told the other class too. They started out already by taking people in custody as hostages. And most of these were prominent people like cabinet ministers and priests and ministers and professors. And they kept them in jail. And when the underground or other people would do something against the Germans, like disrupt their trains or whatever, they would take 15 of these people and shoot them and write their names in the newspaper. And he said, now this is what we've done. That was not secret. We knew already who the people were who were in custody. And they picked 15 of them, they shoot it, and they said, okay, these 15 we have shot. The next time you'll do it, we'll shoot another 15. And towards the end of the war, particularly in the winter of 1944 and 1945, they had a lot of people in custody whom they had arrested for underground activities. And they were in jails and in police stations. So the underground attacked those jails and police stations trying to rescue these people. And what they would do, they would take 20 people off the street and shoot them. And they did that all over the city. There are numerous areas in the cities where there are now crosses and little monuments where they just took 20 people. It was always 20. They would grab 20 people and shoot them. My sister, who was 5 years younger than I am, so she was only 16 years old. She saw that happen, and she never got over that. And they did that not only in Rotterdam, but they did it in The Hague and in Amsterdam and in Utrecht. All over the occupied countries, they would shoot people right in the street.
Did you ever feel guilty that you were being forced to lie?
That I wasn't guilty?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I felt guilty. I felt guilty that I tried to, or that I wanted to murder a guy, but I didn't. I am always happy that I was kept from that, because, see, the morals change. And I felt that very strongly among young people. The morals changed. Stealing was accepted. Lying was accepted. As long as it was against the Germans. Guys, people who had worked for the Germans or who had betrayed somebody else were executed. I know right in my street, somebody was riding a bicycle and he was a traitor, and somebody else comes by and shoots him right off his bicycle. I mean, it's... that happened. I saw 2 German soldiers murder a man, and nobody did anything. 2 Navy men who was on a streetcar. The streetcar has sliding doors with a rod in the middle that you can hang on to when you step in. And the streetcar was just leaving, and the gentleman comes running, and he jumps on the running board and grabs that bar, and he tries to step inside, and 2 Navy men stand there, and they loosen his hands and they throw him backwards out of the streetcar just for fun, and he landed on his head and he died.
Do you think that movies and books that are written are accurate to what really happened?
Some of them, yeah, some of them. Like I said, there was a very great deal of complicity with the Nazis. Don't forget that Germany lost the First World War, and the restrictions that were placed on the German nation were very harsh. They were unwisely harsh. And when a man like Hitler showed up and he says, I will build you up to be a great nation again, and we will take back what we have lost, the people listened to him because they were so poor and their money, the value of their money had deteriorated so badly that what used to cost a mark used to cost thousands of marks because it wasn't worth anything. So when a man came along who promised them the sky, they believed him. Then, of course, in Central Europe, there has always been a history of anti-Semitism. And when he hooked into that and made anti-Semitism a part of his belief system, that pulled in a lot of people.
Are you glad you're still alive?
What?
Are you glad you're still alive?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, very much so. And I hope to stay around a little while yet. I'm only 75 years old, so. And I've been married 52 years.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm alive. Did they hurt me? Well, they tried, but personally, they never got me. I had one of these passes, so I was walking on the train and they stopped me, and then I had this pass, so I didn't have to go. No, I have never been arrested. I've never been in a concentration camp. I'm not a hero. I was not in the underground. I only am a guy who refused to go to Germany. And he said, if you want me to come and stand in front of my house so you can pick me up, you have a second thing coming. I am not going. Okay?
Did the lawsuit against the Jews affect you and your family?
Yeah. Yeah, my father helped Jews escape. My father-in-law helped Jews escape. Both of my father and my father-in-law have certificates, and I'm very sorry they got lost in the shuffle. When I moved to the United States, I don't know where they are. We have certificates that the Israeli people planted trees in our name for helping the Jews in home. But there is a variety of numbers available because we never kept track of Jews. You know, Jews were just Dutch people. We never knew. That the estimates are that there were 110,000 Jews in Holland, and the Germans killed 98,000 of them. I'll tell you about these people. I was in hiding with Jews who later became part of my family. And this is a couple. And there was another couple that was her sister, so there were two sisters and two husbands, 4 people. And later on they found a cousin or a niece, I don't know, who came back out of concentration camps, and she had been operated on by Mendele, and she was all crippled up. And for these 5 people, they lost 52 members of their family. They had 4 grown sons, and during the war, they were contacted by an organization and said, if you pay us large sums of money, we will see that these boys go to Switzerland. So they thought that their boys were rescued, that they were not dead. Then after the war, they found out that this was a German operation to get money out of the Jews. And they sent these boys to concentration camps and killed all of them.
Did you ever lose a prize possession?
Did I ever lose a prize? My freedom. My freedom. I lived in a democratic country. Holland is a very free country. And here for 5 years we lived under a totalitarian regime where human life and liberty means absolutely nothing. I think that's the biggest thing I ever lost. Anybody else? You guys ask good questions, by the way. I hope the answers are the same.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I'll probably give you guys about 7 minutes, but if you want to...
You know what my son did to me? He invited the press. There was a press photographer and a reporter here today.
And PLP, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're all.
Thank you.